Attention shoppers, welcome to episode 54 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want, and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. All the footage of this episode was generously donated by Stippo, a dedicated Dead Rising YouTuber, so I definitely recommend checking him out. I'll give you another reminder at the end of the video, but for right now, let's get going. Okay, so first I want to explore the map that's used for Connie and Dakota's cutscene. Or should I say, maps. There's actually two going on here, but this is going to be the first one that we're looking at because this is actually the first one that's used in the actual game. And my goodness, I did not expect for there to be so much land to cover for a cutscene that barely uses any of it, and is only used for one specific portion of the game. You don't usually see stuff like this. But hey, that was just used for one part of the cutscene. A very small portion of the cutscene. This second map is even more impressive. Check this out. This road is long and winding, and is later used for the part where they get in an accident with the 18-wheeler, and we can actually explore the entire town that's used in this cutscene. Now granted, the buildings and everything are cheap and easy looking squares, but the fact that they're squares at all is still pretty impressive, considering the fact that when you look at this cutscene, you barely even get a chance to see them, and could have easily been passed off as 2D textures. So some of you might remember this one scene where the door is welded shut, and if you don't, I don't blame you. The game is now, oh my god, 11 years old. But to get you up to speed, there's a scene in the game where the door is welded shut and you're not allowed to pass through it because of such. But you can hear zombies moaning on the other side of the door. Well, what's really cool here is that if we take the character outside of the boundaries and into the hallway on the other side, you can actually see that there are no zombies whatsoever. The developers gave you, the player, a sound effect, and it was up to you to fill in the rest. Here's a scene of old Franklin jumping into one of the many unloaded areas, this one in particular being Paradise Plaza, and when you get up this close you can see just how low quality the render is. Obviously the players aren't meant to see it this close up, and so to save on resources, the developers at Capcom knowingly put lower quality models into these areas. Like for example, all these storefronts have pictures of their inventory and not an actual area for you to walk around in. So a natural curiosity when you're in Leisure Park parking lot is what's beyond the barrier here? Well, as you start to learn with a lot of video games in general, if a wall like this is so tall that you can't see anything beyond it, there's a pretty solid chance that once you actually get over that said boundary, you're not going to find anything. What we're seeing here high up into the air is just the void, complete nothingness meeting with the game's skybox. So now we're going to take a look at what you guys probably all came here to see, which is the parking lot and outside area of the mall. And one of the things that shocked me almost immediately is that you can actually walk on the ground here. Typically, if you're outside the boundaries of a game, you're most likely going to fall through the floor. Heck, even the cars have a surface that you can actually stand on, which all this should be said for the zombies, but they just fell through the ground, okay. But let's not pay attention to that. What we should be paying attention to is the fact that these cars don't have an interior. Yeah, check it out, the windshields are actually projecting textures that represent the interior of these cars. Now, what tour of the outside of the mall would be complete without taking a look at the town itself? Now, what Stippo did here was that he went all the way down to one end of the street until he was met with some collision, and then turned it around to go to the other side of the street until he met the same fate. But it's really surprising just how much detail there are to these buildings, even at this distance. Usually when you get to this point of any game, all the signs and windows become incredibly blotchy and it becomes difficult to see anything. But as you can see, it's plenty detailed. You can actually read fried chicken on that restaurant. Although why anyone would have a fried chicken joint right outside of a mall is not really business savvy, I'm assuming. Now, if you weren't here to see the outside of the mall, you were probably here to see this. Here's the map of Wilmette Town used during the helicopter scene at the very start of the game. Now, the game uses this map to show off a couple scenes where the zombies are taking over the town, but they're very scarce about it. And of course, your imagination just runs wild with what does this town look like and what would it be like to explore it when you're trapped inside of the mall for the rest of the game. Well, now we can take a look. And of course, just like the first scene that I showed you in the episode, this map has way more going on for it than any logical person thought there would be when you understand that the game used so little of it. But much to my surprise, there's pretty much an entire realized town here. And if there was just a little more polish added to these buildings, you could probably actually make this another area of the game. Here's what it looks like when we disable area loading. See, normally you'd get a loading screen once you start driving down this ramp. But without that flag in place, we can actually see this tunnel unloaded. This is essentially what is actually there before you walk into that area. In the final boss stage, you know, the fist fight battle, there isn't many areas that have collision out of bounds, but as you can see, Stippo here has found platforms that you can reach and stand on. Even though clearly you're not supposed to be up here, because we just walked through that trailer and it doesn't even exist in the back. Still, once again, very surprised by the fact that there's a couple areas in this game that Frank can actually walk around on. Over here, some of you might remember that there's an invisible wall here that doesn't allow players to pass. Now, normally I would take Magic Camera through here and just call it a day, but Stippo has his own ways of breaking the boundaries. Here in this clip, you can see that he spawns a car that allows him to drive through the boundaries, because the game doesn't know how to behave to this situation. And before we leave this area, we can actually show you what's beyond the gate that prevents you from leaving. Here's another example of bypassing loading zones. In Wonderland Plaza, when we walk down this hallway, it would normally load the North Plaza. However, we can see that that long distance model is actually a painted wall of the North Plaza, complete with a nice red velvet rope and an under construction sign. In Leisure Park, we can see the Movie Land storage room with a door that doesn't open. Now, the only way to get in here normally is for the game to place you in there, you know, from being knocked out by the cult. But here, Stippo shows you what's actually inside this room by jumping into it. And as you can see, it's just more of the park, which means that the actual inside of the storage room is stored elsewhere. Here, once again, we can see what the unloaded North Plaza looks like by disabling the loading area. Disabling this area shows that a very small portion of it is actually rendered. When you shoot this glass and walk through, it loads you into the supermarket. However, I'm almost certain at this point you're very much aware of how this was pulled off, so once we walk our way through, you can see a very unrendered Sion's Food and Stuff hanging out in the back. For example, the aisles have all flat textures. The dairy section also is very flat and, for lack of a better way of putting it, able to be walked through by Frank. And we also have the squarest stack of oranges I've ever seen in my life. And here's a nice, glorious zoom out of the mall itself. And surprisingly, the parking lot's rendered out there too, which again is pretty surprising, at least when you're this deep into the mall, and when you consider the fact that the game typically renders hundreds of zombies at any given time. You probably hear YouTubers all the time say thank you for watching, to the point where it doesn't really even have a meaning anymore. I just want to let you know, if you made it to this part of the video and you've been watching, I really do appreciate that you've been watching. And if you want someone to thank for this video, don't thank me. Feel free to hop over onto Stippo's channel and give him all the credit. And while you're there, you can definitely check out one of his videos. I definitely recommend it. If you're a fan of Dead Rising, if that's why you're here, this guy just dedicates his entire channel to all artifacts that are related to Dead Rising. So please, definitely check him out, see some cool stuff, because every time someone from my audience goes over and says hello, it makes me feel better and better, accepting Stippo's gracious help. But I hope you stick around here too, because in the future we're going to be doing Uncharted 2, Batman Arkham Asylum, and many other non-Nintendo games, as well as some Nintendo games. I hope you guys can appreciate the company that saved the gaming industry. But hey, that's all I got for now. I'll see you next week. Later.